went around the car to the driver's side and opened the door, and that's when he saw Mischelle.
Does Mark have a suspect in this killing?
No, sir.
He had said that his friend might have been a policeman or a sheriff or something like that.
I didn't take but a split second. I said, that's not Mark. I said, that's Matt.
Mark have it, or Matt have it, or vampire or friend. Why was that not done?
So he's like, hey man, I saw this murder in the news. They don't know who did it. Let's tell them Josh did it.
I don't know. I don't know that they weren't.
It seemed like pretty much anything was for sale down there
I don't know.
at the right price.
He said, he said, Bill's been in there long enough. He's made enough money. He says, it's about time a younger man gets in there. He said, like you can get in there and make some good money.
Paychecks from bullshit.
They never investigated me. They merely put me on trial and told the jury they had.
All right, I'm Bob Miller, the host of the Lawless Files, here with another bonus episode. We're here with Josh Kezer. If you've listened to the podcast, you know who he is. Josh was wrongfully convicted for the murder of Angela Mischelle Lawless and spent 16 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And a lot of the podcast that we've done, obviously, is kind of unwinding how that happened, why that happened, and how it's being undone. And I wanted to have Josh on again. We've had some breaking news here recently with the prosecutor. I'll just go ahead and read. We've done an episode on this, but I'm gonna go ahead and read the statement or portions of the statement again, so everybody's clear on what we're talking about here. This is coming from Amanda Ash. She's the current prosecutor in Scott County. She would have the decision on whether to file charges in this murder or not. She's been in office for a couple years now. She was not the prosecutor when there was a grand jury here a few years ago. That was Paul Boyd, but she's since taken office. And so, I was asking her questions. Now that we've come out with a lot of this information on the podcast, I wanted her to address some things, particularly as it relates to conflicts of interest in the sheriff's department. So ultimately asked a bunch of questions about that, and she came out with a statement. And this is, she talked a little bit at the top of the release about how she had a hard time kind of navigating all of the documents in the Lawless case. And so one of the things that she's done is contacted the highway patrol team, the violent crime support unit that helps organize and digitize current major case investigations. So that's supposed to help her organize the files and stuff, but that's not the big news here. The big news is later in the release, and it says, further, during my time going through the case files, I learned of a new unit being formed with the Missouri Attorney General's office. In December 2020, the Missouri Attorney General announced the Missouri Cold Case Unit for the Attorney General's office. This office focuses on cold case investigations within Missouri. This unit has agreed to step in to the Lawless investigation and provide assistance and an independent review of the case files of this investigation. So that's really big news. Some of the stuff that we've been talking about on social media, on our discussion group and whatnot, is this conflict of interest. A lot of people have been asking, what can we do? What can we do? I was like, you need to, we need to petition our government to try to remove that conflict of interest and get the case into the hands of someone, of another entity. She goes on, she says, finally, as part of the cold case unit review, the Missouri State Highway Patrol Division of Drug and Crime Control, known as the DDCC, will be stepping into the case to provide an independent investigator's perspective of the case files and determining a plan for moving forward. Again, this moves it kind of, more into some other hands and to some other eyes to get, more investigative power. We're going to get into why there's still some problems with this here in a minute. But she finished the document by saying, when I took office in 2019, I pledged to do an independent review of the Lawless case file. I believe that these outside agencies stepping in to assist in this case will be a huge step in the right direction. All right, so that's that's the basics of the report itself. If you go back and listen to what I've dubbed episode 10.5, I've already kind of broken this down, but to review a little bit more, this is a positive step to get, especially the AG's, unit on this, but there are still some problems here with potential conflict of interest. The highway patrol has had, especially the highway patrol, they've had some issues here regarding, the highway patrol did not cooperate with Rick Walter at all when he was trying to get evidence about a gun and a different murder and things of that nature. They played hardball on that. We have the example of the SEMO drug task force, the director firing Bill Bonert from the task force when he agreed to testify up in Jefferson City for Josh's case. Of course, we have Don Wyndham, who was involved in Josh's conviction, and he was the one who chased down some the snitches and got them to unrecant. And some of the information that came forward there was that they didn't want to face more charges of filing a false report or what have you. That it could have ramped up their sentences. So there's problems here within the highway patrol particularly. And frankly, Rick Walter, when he reopened this stuff, man, he kind of kicked a hornet's nest a little bit. Nobody was very happy that he did this, and the highway patrol stood against it in a lot of different ways. And then you have the AG's office. Of course, we have Kenny Holsoff, who was appointed to handle this case as a special prosecutor out of the Attorney General's office. Of course, he's a long-standing Republican, and the current AG is a Republican. So you never know how these things might, transpire. But you also had Van Godzi there, and you had, you have the incident where, Josh's got the communication from one of the Scott County prosecuting attorney's investigators that he personally hand-delivered a document to Kenny Holsoff, and that information did not get passed along to the defense. So in order for this to be really a positive step, each of those entities really has to set aside public perception and really dedicate themselves to the truth and what happened. So given with all that background, Josh, I'm going to open it up to you. Kind of what were your thoughts and perceptions when you found out that the Scott County current prosecutor has called upon these different jurisdictions to assist?
My first thoughts with the highway patrol went to Don Wyndham. And now, what we know of Don Wyndham is that he facilitated the deals with Bill Farrell and Morley Swingle for the Lions. Snitching, right, kind of indicates that maybe they said something accurate, or informant indicates they said something accurate. I'm more settling on with liars, but he facilitated the deals with the liars and then chased down Sean Mangus all the way down to Louisiana to convince him to recant his recantation. And then again, like you said, the entire process of my exoneration, they opposed every move that my defense and Rick Walter made. They had no interest in transparency. They had no interest in self-examination. And had they had their way, I'd still be in prison. That doesn't mean that there aren't good men and good women in the highway patrol. Even my exoneration was a long time ago. That was 13 years ago. So it's possible that there are, good men and women that are employed there now and that are willing to investigate this. But my question is, are they willing to investigate Don Wyndham? a man who has been celebrated in the Missouri Highway Patrol? Are they willing to thoroughly examine his behavior? Or are they willing to just accept his explanations? And Don didn't do everything bad. There was some things that Don did that are acceptable behavior in a murder investigation, but he did some things, and the things he did, they crossed boundaries. And then there's the Attorney General's office. Well, the Attorney General's office, I mean, they represented my initial prosecution in 93, 94 in Kenny Holsoff, and then they opposed my exoneration in 2008. So it causes me to question their bias and potential conflict of interest. Now, that being said, with the AG's office, you know, it's been my experience that that Mike Spillane, the Attorney General prosecutor that opposed my exoneration in 2008, it's been my experience that he's a good man, that he accepts my innocence, and you know, that's my knowledge, and that he's moved on. He's a good man. But my question is, who is the man that is going to be investigating this? Because this, you know, when this, I believe it's a man named Kevin Zellner is the cold case, special prosecuting cold case investigator and prosecuting attorney with the Missouri Attorney General's office. Who is he? You know, where is he from? My understanding is he's from possibly down in that area. So where are his loyalties? You know, to me, this isn't just about the offices or the organizations that are being brought in, but who are the people being brought in? I want to know who the individuals are. Who are the investigators? Who are the attorneys? Who are the who are they working with within their office? Because it matters when we talk, when we think about this case. People need to understand that partly how this was able to be done to me is because of the loyalties that spread out, that branch out. I mean, with Bill Farrell riding horses with FBI agents, and Bill Farrell having contacts with DEA and FBI agents because of his activities with the CMO Drug Crime Task Force. The fact that Bill Farrell used to, I believe he was president, or he was the head of the Missouri Sheriff's Organization. The fact that recently a Scott County police officer, Sykeston police officer, was the lead law enforcement officer in the state of Missouri. So my question is, you know, with these people with the Highway Patrol and with the Attorney General's office, who are they, and what are, you know, where are their loyalties? Or if their loyalties are with Angela Mischelle Lawless, then that's where their loyalties should be.
And
If
with
they're anywhere else,
yeah, and with the people of Missouri, I mean, it's, yeah.
Well, with all due respect to the people of Missouri, Bob, I really don't care about them. And I
understand that, but
I'm being blunt. I don't care an iota.
Yes.
And when it comes to this investigation, I don't care an iota about the people in Missouri. What I care about is Angela Mischelle Lawless.
Yeah.
If their loyalties are with her, right, then I am satisfied. If they're anywhere else, then there's a problem.
The point that I'm trying to make, Josh, is that the people of Missouri pay for them, pay their salaries. You know, like, their loyalties should not be to other law enforcement. Their loyalties should not be to anybody, you know, like to anybody, but to find the truth and bring justice. And
I get where you're coming from, but I'm coming from
I
a
understand.
30-year experience, Bob. I'm coming from it from my experience. The entire longevity of this case is that no one no one's really dedicated a complete prioritization of this case to Angela Mischelle Lawless. With all due respect, right? Not even Rick Walter, because Rick Walter he had split priorities, because in order to get her justice, he had to concentrate on me too. Because once you find out an innocent man is in prison, you have to take care of that in order to take care of the victim in the case. And that is one of the criminal injustices in this case, is that by falsely convicting me, they've criminally distracted and obstructed the case from day one. And there hasn't been a point where we've been allowed to just concentrate on her since the day they charged me. And I feel like that's more than unfortunate. And that's the reason why I say, with all due respect, right? I don't care about anybody else in this except her, except Angela Mischelle Lawless.
Yeah, I
right?
hear that.
These people decided to take a job. They decided to do this job, right? Whether or not it's for pay, whether or not it's for citizens, whether or not it's for free. They've decided to be involved in the Missouri Attorney General's office and in the Highway Patrol and in the Scott County Prosecutor's office. And if they're going to be allowed, which I can see no reason why they should be allowed, but the Scott County Sheriff's Department, everybody employed in those organizations have taken a job and they've given an oath, and they need to keep it. And they don't need to keep it for me, and they don't need to keep it even for the Lawless Files or for the Missouri citizens. They need to keep it for Angela Mischelle Lawless. That's my approach, in my opinion, Bob.
Yeah, no, that's very clear, well stated. I think we're just making complimentary things here. I want to go back to just real quickly, just touch on it, that the DDCC and the SEMO Drug Task Force work together a lot. I mean, it's the Patrol Division of Drug and Crime Control. I mean, the word drug is in there. So the DDCC and the SEMO Drug Task Force, they work together. And so the Drug Task Force, again, they're the ones, the former director of the SEMO Drug Task Force is the one who fired Bill Bonert. Again, he took the testimony or took the statement from Mark Abbott in '97 when he said that he saw Kevin Williams shoot Mischelle. And so when it came time for him to testify in your case, he told the former director of the SEMO Task Force what he was going to do, and they said you shouldn't do that. You don't know if what he's saying is true or not. And my point on that is, look, this, when Josh was convicted, drugs were not part of the equation. Like, why is the SEMO Drug Task Force even stepping in here and trying to prevent someone from testifying? So
right. And think about what he said. You don't know if it's true or not. You don't know if a man who was used as the primary witness in a murder investigation is telling you the truth or not. That alone should have been something that should have rose red flags.
Yeah, for sure. Good point.
Right. The very fact that a man said he saw another man shoot a person should always be enough for that person to testify. And the very fact that the SEMO Drug Crime Task Force fired a man for getting involved in my case should cause people great concern.
No doubt.
Because his role in it wasn't to testify and say, I know Kevin Williams murdered Mischelle Lawless because Mark Abbott told me. His role wasn't to say, Mark Abbott told me Kevin Williams shot Mischelle Lawless. I think people don't understand what Bonert's role was in my hearing. His role was to prove inconsistencies and credibility issues with Mark Abbott in my 1993 and 1994 charging phase. That was his role. Right. And why would the SEMO Drug Crime Task Force have a problem with an officer testifying to the truth? Because the truth is, with that statement to Bonert, with Mark Abbott's statement saying that he saw Kevin Williams shoot Angela Mischelle Lawless, it creates credibility issues. But what I've experienced personally is in this case is it seems like no one cares about credibility issues in this case. The history of this case, no one has cared about credibility issues.
Yeah.
There were credibility issues with Steve Graw, who was a career snitch. There were credibility issues with Charles Weisinger, who got details wrong from the jump. There were credibility issues with Sean Mangus because of the deal that he got and the fact that he recanted and then recanted his recantation. There were credibility issues with Wade Howard because he was in there himself for a murder. And there were credibility issues with Jeff Rogers. There were credibility issues with everybody involved in this from the very beginning. There was always been credibility issues with Mark Abbott because he was at the scene, and we now know he was actually Beardsley's first suspect. So there's always been credibility issues.
Yes.
But the only
It-
person who's been consistent in this from day one, the only non-law enforcement officer that's been consistent in this case from day one, whose statement has stayed true and it hasn't wavered, it hasn't changed, there's no consistency issues and there's no credibility issues, is mine.
Yeah. Well, and on the topic of credibility, I mean, it's your alibi witnesses weren't considered credible.
My alibi witnesses weren't investigated, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't investigated. The Highway Patrol that's now involved in this case did not investigate my alibi. The Attorney General's office that's now involved in this case did not investigate my alibi. The Scott County Sheriff's Department did not investigate my alibi. The Scott County Prosecutor's Office did not investigate my alibi. And none of them four entities ever officially questioned me on the case. Don Wyndham on the trip from Kankakee to Scott County asked me a couple of questions about a murder. And as a kid, that put me on alert because it was so out of place. And Don Wyndham, in his notes that he took and turned in later about those questions, he noted that I got quiet. I was never officially questioned about the murder with the knowledge that they were coming at me for a murder, or with the knowledge that there was even a murder.
Right.
I didn't even know about a murder when he asked me the first two questions, so I didn't know why he was even asking me about it. But after I was charged, or even before I was charged, at some point in time before I was charged, they could have talked to me about the murder. You know, where were you on this night and things of that nature, right? Tell us about yourself, Josh. They could have come at me with a good cop, bad cop, and acted like they had things they did not have, whatever. None of those four entities, the Scott County Sheriff's Department, the Scott County Prosecutor's Office, the Missouri Attorney General's Office, and the Missouri Highway Patrol ever questioned me about the homicide and ever investigated my alibi. So yes, I have concerns about their bias and their objectivity in this investigation, because are they going to investigate their own? Are they willing to cross those thin blue lines and investigate their own? Because if they're not, then again, they're not prioritizing Angela Mischelle Lawless. They're prioritizing themselves. They're prioritizing their image.
Yeah.
And
that takes
that
us
concerns me. That really does concern me. Now, let me say this. There are new people in charge of all of these offices, except the Scott County Sheriff's Department. They're still run by Wes Drury, and Wes Drury has been integral in this case from the beginning. And it should be incontrovertible. It should be without controversy that Wes Drury has a conflict of interest. He should not be involved in this case at all.
And it's unclear, and I've sent questions and I haven't received a response about exactly what the jurisdiction will be. It doesn't sound like that jurisdiction of this case has just been handed over. So I'm still waiting for clarification on that. I'm assuming that Scott County still does have jurisdiction on this, which is very problematic, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'd like for anyone in Scott County, whether it be Amanda Ash or Wes Drury, to kind of try to explain how there is no conflict of interest in this case.
No, yeah, Bob, I'm going to respectfully I gotta, no, I don't know, whatever. I don't care what West Jury has to say about this case. I would like to hear Amanda Ash
Yeah.
explain. I'm
But if
interested in what
yeah.
Amanda Ash has to say. West Jury, that man can, he can get lost, man. I got nothing for that man.
Right.
Right. Like, as far as I'm concerned, he is a problem in this case. His conflict of interest is clear.
Yeah.
It is absolutely clear. He was the man who let the Abbotts walk out of the sheriff's department that night without any identifiers. No fingerprint, no photographs, no handwritten notes, no handwritten statements, no recorded testimony, no interrogation, right? And he was the man who obstructed justice ultimately for this case. For everything that we want to say about Bill Farrell and everything we want to say about Mark Abbott and Matt Abbott and Kevin Williams and other people involved in this, and the diabolical lies that Kenny Holsoff told in my trial, and the things that Don Wyndham did, the genesis of the obstruction of justice in this case is West Drury. So I have a serious problem with him being involved in this case. I don't believe it should be questioned that he shouldn't have any involvement as far as jurisdiction is concerned.
Right, but I guess what I would say is as long as Amanda Ash is willing to give independence, right, or shared jurisdiction, however she would want to term that, right, or whatever she would want to do, then I think that maybe it's permissible because she's new to the case for her to share jurisdiction with the Highway Patrol and with the Attorney General's office. But I do think that if anything, the law enforcement that's involved in this should not be anybody associated with Scott County. And I would even say anybody associated with counties next to Scott County, where there may be some form of collusion involved, right? Yeah. The law enforcement officers that actually get involved in an investigation of this need to be completely independent from Scott County. Yeah, Josh, I was only making the point that if he's made a choice, like the current sheriff, West Drury, has made a choice to keep jurisdiction, knowing that this conflict of interest exists.
Yeah.
And I think he owes it to the public and his voters to explain why. That's all I'm saying. I know that you don't care. I don't know, I know that you don't care about that, but
no, I care about that. I'm just saying
there's some accountability that needs to happen there.
No, I know. And that's what I'm saying is, right. I know what you're saying. Okay. That he needs to explain why he's not giving up jurisdiction and things of that nature. And I'm sure that there are people who want to hear what he has to say, right? The citizens of Scott County voted for him as sheriff. They did not elect Rick Walter. They elected West Drury. So I'm sure he has constituents that would like to hear what he has to say. But at the end of the day, all he's going to do is just bump his gums.
Yeah.
To me, all he's going to do
is what he says.
He's going to rattle on, and he's going to, whatever words come out of his mouth, to me, they have no meaning and they don't deserve to be heard. The words that come out of his mouth need to be in a chair across from an independent law enforcement officer questioning him about his involvement in the investigation. That the words that come out of his mouth need to be answering questions to the Missouri Attorney General's office and answering questions to the Highway Patrol, but not as a law enforcement officer, as a character in this case.
Yeah, I agree with all those statements. Whatever he's like, there's really no way around it. There's nothing that he could say that,
and that's what I'm saying, Bob. I'm with you. There's really no way around it. The bottom line, that's just the bottom line. I mean, look at the absolute disrespect he's even shown the case since he's been sheriff. At no point in time has he personally been man enough to reach out to me and talk to me about it. I don't know this for a fact, but it's gotten back to me from other people who are connected with the Lawless family that he hasn't reached out to them, barely, if at all, to talk to them about the case. And to me, that's an utter disrespect. That tells us everything we need to hear, everything we need to know.
All right, so let's take this to the next step. Okay, we've talked about clear conflicts of interest on the local level at Scott County. We've talked about how the Highway Patrol mishandled this case from the beginning and up through the reinvestigation of the case when Rick Walter reopened it. They're now involved. That's a muddy issue that, you know, that the Highway Patrol has with the single drug task. We talked about all of that. We talked about the AGs having some, you know, like how, so I guess what this kind of leads into for me is really ideally, and I think what most people want who I talk to is for the feds to get involved in this case. I think that's the most pure, you know, that's the most pure motive. Lack of a better word.
That's the most trustworthy approach.
Trustworthy, you know, yeah.
So there's perception involved in this case at this point, because we're dealing with three decades of corruption, and 3 decades of mishandling.
Yeah.
Right. So that alone, the perception of the case is important because we want to be able to trust the investigation and trust the outcome. Right. So we have people, and the podcast makes it clear who our suspects are, and people that we believe committed the crime, or the people that we believe have committed crimes, not just the Angela Mischelle Lawless murder, but other crimes in Scott County. Right. So what we need is we need investigators that have come in and not investigated according to what we believe, and not investigated according to findings by organizations that have mishandled the case. We need an entity to come in and truly investigate the case to where we can trust the process, trust the outcome, and that when a man or men and women end up in prison for the crimes they've committed in Scott County, that we can trust the results. Because at this point, at no point in time, you know, have we been able to trust anything with it. I'm living evidence of that. I'm living proof.
Right.
And so, yeah, I know people think that I'm in some type of like personal vendetta. It is personal, but I wouldn't term it a personal vendetta. I wouldn't say that I'm blind to constitutional rights and civil rights and due process and the preponderance of evidence. I'm not. If anything, I'm more focused on those things than perhaps anybody. You know, I do believe that I know through my investigation who killed Angela Mischelle Lawless, and I do believe that I know other people who have committed other crimes in Scott County. But it isn't up to me to convict those men, to convict those people. That's the thing. We want to be able to trust the process, Bob, and we can't trust it if it's with organizations, right, that I mean, I don't want to say we can't, but it's hard for us to trust it if it's with organizations that have already mishandled it.
I think that's where I land too. It's not so much that the people in the AG's office today are corrupt, or the Highway Patrol, that the people who are in those positions today are corrupt. It's just like, man, you guys have had a couple of opportunities already anyway. But
I mean, I've heard good things. I've heard good things about Kevin Zellner. Yeah. Right. I have a source that knows him. And I've heard good things about the man. I have no personal knowledge of any impropriety by anybody currently in the Missouri Attorney General's office, and I have no knowledge of impropriety unless Don Windham is still employed by the Attorney General's office, and the gentleman who fired Bonert, if he's still employed by the Missouri Highway Patrol.
Yeah, I don't think either one of them are actually.
So if neither one of those men are employed by the Highway Patrol, I have no knowledge of any improprieties committed by anybody involved in the Missouri Highway Patrol. But it's not about knowledge; it's about perception.
Right, and it's like I said, cautiously optimistic. It's a positive step that it's getting into, in front of some of these folks rather than sticking with Scott County.
Yeah.
But what I kind of need the listeners to understand is when the feds, whether it be the Justice Department or the FBI, when they get involved, they can't just jump in and start investigating a murder case. There has to be like specific, narrow kind of ways that they get in. And
I'm sure, but I'm sure that I've had that suggested to me before, but I'm sure that if there's enough evidence of bias or jurisdictional issues or objectivity issues, then I'm sure that there is provision for the FBI to get involved. But the thing is, here's my thing. I think it would be a show of good faith on Amanda Ash's part. She's already reached out to the Missouri Attorney General's office. She's already reached out to the Missouri Highway Patrol, and we're thankful for that. That shows that's a step in the right direction, and we appreciate that, right? But I think that it would show us even more, right, if she requested the Justice Department's involvement. She has the ability, she has the authority to request their involvement just as she did the others.
Well, in my investigation of like how FBI gets involved, one of the key things that I've seen that, and I'm just looking at the website, I'm like just researching how in what instances, and one of them is this color of law statute. And so what that means is if law enforcement of any type has violated the color of law in a criminal way and violated someone's constitutional rights, whatever that is, then they have an avenue to get into a case. And so that's, and kind of as we've looked at the podcast and we've looked at all of these things that have happened, especially with Bill Ferrell, it looks like on the surface that perhaps a criminal, violations have happened.
Yeah, let me, and not to cut you off, but we don't need to say looks like. I'm living evidence that they violated constitutional rights. That's how I got exonerated.
Right.
So
but
they violated my civil rights. They violated my constitutional rights. They violated their oath to Scott County, right? To conduct themselves in a way that respects the law. So, but it goes to me, where I'm at again. Amanda Ash took the right step by requesting the Missouri Attorney General's office and the Missouri Highway Patrol, requesting their involvement in the investigation. What I would say is I think it would even show more. It would show more to Scott County and to myself and the Lawless family if she would request the assistance of the feds. If she was willing to do that, then that brings that opens up the case entirely.
Well, to kind of piggyback on that point, yes, a court has already ruled that they have violated your constitutional rights. That has happened. The question that gets the FBI involved is that were crimes committed during that process? And so I think, again, listen to the podcast, go back and listen to all the things that we've talked about. And you can't tell me that something doesn't need to be investigated there from a legal.
Well, absolutely, Bob. We talked about earlier this week on the phone about how, with the things that you discussed on the Lawless Files, that it has the appearance at this point, has the appearance that Bill Ferrell knew who killed Angela Mischelle Lawless, and that he obstructed justice for her by guiding the investigation in a way that was almost National Lampoons.
Yeah.
I mean, He takes the investigation away from his second in command, Beardsley, and he gives it to his girlfriend, who had never investigated a major case before. He brings Larry Abbott, the man that he knew at the point when he brought Larry Abbott to with him to discuss with someone about the gun. He knew at that point that Larry Abbott's son, Mark Abbott, was a suspect. So he brought a suspect's father with him to discuss the gun in the murder case that his son was a suspect in.
Yeah.
And this same father, Larry Abbott, Rick Walter is on record of saying that Larry offered him a significant amount of money the moment he, was elected or looked like he was going to be elected. And from Rick's perspective, it was to influence his behavior, potentially in the Lawless case. To me, that alone, those two things alone, show a potential intentional cover-up of a murder. And if by that point you were intentionally covering up a murder, then you knew by the point I was arrested and charged that you were charging an innocent man. You knew Bill Farrell knew that he was charging an innocent man. And if we're to believe that, and I believe that there's enough for us to believe that, I think that's been proven, then he knew that they were pursuing the death penalty against an innocent man. And if that's not a crime, I don't know what is.
Well, yeah, and let's not forget that Bill Farrell's the one that told Kevin Williams the case had been reopened. That, to me, that's just egregious. That's just, I mean,
that's criminal. That's criminal.
That right there, yeah, along with the other two that you've mentioned, like
that's egregiously criminal. That is severely criminal. That in and of itself should be enough for the feds to get involved.
Yeah.
Now, Bill Farrell wasn't the elected sheriff at that point.
Right.
But why is the former sheriff, the man who was sheriff at the time of Angela Mischelle Lawless's homicide, communicating with a man with a prime suspect in the middle of the night in a truck? And why are they talking about emails from me? Why are they talking about Kevin asking Bill, am I okay? What does Josh know? Why are they talking about his involvement in the investigation? Why is Bill Farrell leaking information to a suspect?
Yeah, and again, for those who
What
might be thinking,
possible motivation could he have to do that, Bob?
Yeah. So again, let's just talk about this real quick. This is coming from Rick Walter, credible source.
Mhm.
This is coming from an ex-girlfriend of Kevin Williams. I find her credible, but also
She was in the truck, Bob, when it happened. She was in the truck.
Yeah, right. And she described what the truck.
Yeah. So this isn't someone that heard about it from somebody, over dinner or in a barber shop.
Yeah.
This was a woman who was in the truck.
Yep.
Who witnessed it happen, who witnessed why it happened because of my emails.
Right.
Where I was letting Kevin Williams' family know that I know what happened through my investigation and that Kevin needs to come forward and talk.
Right.
And it scared Kevin, and Kevin approached, according to this witness, Kevin's ex-girlfriend, Kevin then approached Bill Farrell, and they met in the middle of the night in a truck.
In a bank parking lot.
In a bank parking lot.
Right.
There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. Bill shouldn't have been having a conversation with Kevin Williams at all, period, because he was no longer a law enforcement officer at that point. But if Bill was going to have a conversation with him, it should have been in the sheriff's department alongside Rick Walter. It should not have been by himself in some clandestine meeting to attempt to influence the investigation and sidetrack. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. And one thing that we're going to talk about here we're probably going to get into in episode 12, I think, is Mark Abbott's testimony. Mark Abbott testified in
Guys, my dog's here. He's wanting some attention. He's a big boy too. So buddy, come on.
Good
Come
boy,
on, go lay down. Go lay down. Yeah, he's a pit bull mastiff for your listeners. So
Yeah.
he tends to impose himself.
My
when he's ready to impose
dog's over here
himself.
snoring. So
Yeah, you
but,
got a little dog though, man. So
yeah. But anyway, Mark Abbott testified in the deposition for your exoneration case. He testified that Bill Farrell was calling Kevin Williams frequently and they were talking about the case.
yeah,
I mean, that's under oath. That's from one of the witnesses. I mean, from one of the suspects himself.
My question is,
You know,
I have another question regarding Kevin Williams, since we're talking about Kevin Williams. I mean, we're talking about Bill Farrell, but we're also talking about Kevin Williams. How is it possible for a man to be on audio threatening to murder an elected sheriff? How is it possible for that man to not be charged? And so your listeners can know, Rick Walter sought charges against Kevin Williams for that. He approached other agencies because he couldn't do it himself, because that would have been prejudice, because he was the victim. Rick Walter was the victim in that incident. But there's an audio that your podcast has played more than once where Kevin Williams is threatening to put a bullet between, threatening to shoot Rick Walter, the elected sheriff, the prime, one of the prime suspects in the Mischelle Lawless murder, is threatening to shoot the lead law enforcement officer at that time in the Mischelle Lawless murder investigation. Threatening to kill him, and he doesn't get charged. There's no charges. See, that concerns me as well. And I am not a fan of vigilante justice. I feel like people shouldn't take the law in their own hands. But if there's a county on God's green earth that tempts people to do things themselves, it's Scott County. So if people are wondering why I have been the one that's been investigating this case, even before I got out of prison, but especially since I got out of prison, it's because I just don't trust Scott County. I don't believe in Scott. Scott County doesn't know everything I know. Amanda Ash doesn't know everything I know. Bob Miller, you have been discovering that you don't know everything I know, because I hold on to some of it closely because this case means that much to me. And I just need to, I need for Amanda Ash to show me I can trust her, because otherwise I'm not subjecting my sources to them. I'm not going to expose my sources to them. I'm not going to do that. That my form of vigilante justice is investigating this murder on my own.
And that's why the question of jurisdiction matters so much.
Yes.
Because, if someone goes like, oh, well, I have information, I can go to the AG's office now. Is the AG just going to hand that information down the line? Does that get back to, that's why some of these things matter so much. Like, it's not
Absolutely.
just arbitrary.
You and I both have
questions.
sources. I know that you and I both have sources that have expressed fear of West jury. I know you and I both have sources that have expressed fear in the Scott County Prosecutor's Office. So they don't want to come forward. That's why you have so many anonymous sources in the podcast. That's why I have anonymous sources, because they're afraid of Scott County.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of nitpicking jurisdiction. It's not just a matter of, did West jury, was he involved in a conspiracy? I mean, I'd like that to be investigated, don't get me wrong, but it's also this public perception. Like when you have sources who have told me that they've heard that the sheriff has been in the pocket of certain individuals, there's a community of distrust out there, and who knows who might come forward if they could, if they didn't have that roadblock in front of them. So this is why I've been pushing it like so hard.
Absolutely.
It's not just, get it in somebody's hands because they might be able to do something. It's also because more people might come forward if they have law enforcement they can trust.
Absolutely.
It's
that's important.
central to what's going on here, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
So, you know,
I got a source, Bob, that that I've spoken to, and it's a former person. It's one of the people that testified against me in my 94 trial. I'm not going to say who right now because we're still in the process of we don't know if she wants to go on the record yet, but she's told me that she testified against me because she was threatened by Bill Farrell and Brenda Ships. She told me that they knew she had nothing to do with the murder, but they didn't care. They wanted her to testify against me and say whatever they said. She basically was told to say what they said to her in her statements against me, in the depositions against me, and in her trial testimony against me. And that's criminal. We're talking about criminal. That's intimidation. That's tampering. That's criminal. That is there a worse form of criminal obstruction than the threat to charge a woman as a co-conspirator to murder and knowing she didn't do it and using that as leverage against her? That happened in my case.
yeah,
And
people
to
are
me,
shocked.
that needs to be investigated as well. That
People are
people-
shocked by this podcast, but there's so much more that
we haven't even gotten into, Bob. Like
Yeah.
what I just said hasn't even touched the podcast yet because we're still in the process of, this girl is scared.
right.
She's
Yeah.
terrified.
Yeah.
Right. Because West Drury is still involved and Bill Farrell is still alive. So she's terrified.
Yeah.
But that happened to her. They told her, they knew I didn't do it. They didn't care. They knew she didn't do it. They didn't care. They just wanted her to testify against me.
Yeah. So, kind of put a bow on this topic. You and I both agree, and several others that Rick Walter also. We all kind of would prefer to see this in the hands of the feds, if that can be done. I think we've shown through my investigation, through what you've said here today, through what's on the record, that there does seem to be enough just on the surface to open up a line of inquiry if the feds chose to do so. And that's part of why I've been trying to raise awareness of this case. It's the news that came from Amanda Ash was good news. It was a step in a positive direction, but I don't think this is a situation where where the public can rest assured now. I think the public needs to keep pushing and demanding, further investigation up through the federal level.
And I agree with you. I think it was a good step, but I think there's another step. I don't believe that we should be in a position where we have to prove that the feds should get involved, like on their own. A step can be taken. Like I said,
Yeah.
I read a lot, right? And I've read true crime books. I've read books written by feds. I've read books written by law enforcement officers. There have been cases throughout our country's recent history where counties, law enforcement officers, prosecutors have requested the assistance of the feds. And I feel like if Amanda Ash took that additional step, she's already taken some good steps, but if she takes that additional step, it'd be that much more trustworthy. Myself, I've answered every question asked of me. I've testified when I could. I wanted to testify in my 1994 trial. My lawyers convinced me to do otherwise, to not testify. It's been examined on the Lawless Files. Al Lowe's was a buffoon. He didn't know what he was doing. He was out of his water, and he was out of his depth. He didn't know what he was doing. And he should have allowed me to testify because, as you went over, I had testified in a previous hearing and I carried myself very well. I believe I would have done the same thing in 1990 in my 1994 trial itself. But every time I have testified in my 2008 hearing, I carry myself very well. I'm very honest. I won't hide anything. If you ask me about my history as a street kid, I'll tell you the truth. If you ask me about my history with drugs, I'll tell you the truth. My history with alcohol, I'll tell you the truth. I hide nothing. I have nothing to hide. And that is primarily and essentially because I'm not a murderer. And my only concern is this case. Would it be helpful to me if people would perceive me differently sometimes? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not inhuman. I'm not a sociopath. I have feelings, and it's possible to hurt them, and people hurt them regularly.
Yeah. And that's come up here recently, you know, with some Facebook comments and some other things that have happened. Just people,
with rumors and Facebook comments.
People putting crap out there, you know. It's
but it hurts. It's not inconsequential, because this case has plagued my life for the large majority of my life. But that being said, you know, I can push past those, and I can push through those, in order to focus on the case, in order to and to focus on, to me, it's bigger than just focusing on a case. It's in order to focus on justice for Angela Mischelle Lawless. I still, every time those words come out of my mouth, I don't think that people understand just how out of body that is for me. Because I didn't know her. I never met her. No previous interaction. So it's odd to have a mission that involves someone you don't know and never knew.
For what it's worth, I didn't either, but
yeah, but you know, and I appreciate that, Bob, but you know, for me, they attempted to put me on death row for it.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this, and you've acknowledged this. I've been doing this. I mean, you've been on what, 5 years now?
Depends on when you want to start with it, but 5 years is really hard, dedicated work.
Yeah. Well, you're dedicated investigation.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm not talking about like with Bridget DeCosmo.
Right. But yeah, you've been doing this for 29 years now.
Yeah. I've been literally doing it for 6 times as long as you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's still out of body for me. It's still odd for me. I've had people, good friends and family, see what it's done to me, see the problems it's caused me, emotionally and mentally, and practically in my life, and asked me to stop, you know, for me, told me it would be better for me to stop. And I almost did. After my mother passed away in 2020. But other than that, I don't understand how I could stop. And for me, you know, this is a bit of behind the curtain for people. I partly want to solve this case. It is for Angela Mischelle Lawless, but I do partly want to solve this case so I can actually move on too. I would love to have another primary vision, another primary goal in my life that doesn't involve a murdered woman.
I think that's very relatable. I think people would definitely understand that.
Yeah.
I'd just like to reiterate again about Amanda Ash, good steps, not perfect. You know, there's still a long way to go in this battle. If they're starting an investigation from scratch, it's going to be a long time. But really what we all want is a federal investigation into this so we can have more faith into the whatever investigation happens. So
And I would, like I said, again, I would prefer that the feds get involved by request of Amanda Ash. I think because that would show, that would further solidify her character in this case.
Yeah.
Like I said, I agree with you. It's a good step that she's taken, but there needs to be more.
I agree with that. And one thing real quickly before we go on that particular point, we have to throw this out there because we don't know if an investigation has been started or not, because the feds, the FBI, and the Justice Department do not confirm or deny that any investigation has taken place. You know,
Yeah.
but I mean, usually there are lots of instances where local institutions announce that they have asked for that assistance, and so
Well, I would prefer, what I'm looking for though, Bob, is transparency.
Yeah.
What we need is transparency, right? We need announcements. We need official announcements, and we don't need entities involved that are not going to officially announce. And it does need to be stated and said that the FBI has already been involved in this case in the past. They were the ones that conducted the DNA testing in the case. They were the ones that excluded me before my trial. DNA testing was done in this case prior to my trial, prior to my 1994 trial. And the SEMO crime labs, they had the ability to test the blood, but they did not yet have the science or the technology to test DNA. So they tested the blood. The blood itself excluded me. My blood type wasn't even at the scene, but they went ahead and sent the blood to the FBI, and the FBI further excluded me when they performed DNA testing. So the FBI has already been involved in this case. They already have a file on this case.
they were also involved with the Michelle's diary was also sent to the FBI for some profiling type work, I think. But
So the FBI has involvement with the DNA, and they have involvement with profiling.
Yeah.
They've already been involved in this case. I wasn't aware of the profiling of the diary.
Yeah, because your defense had to wait for that to come back before they could get the diary to look at it.
Which defense? The 94 defense or
the 90, Rosner and Lowe's. They were asking for that. Yeah.
Okay, well, but my working knowledge was the DNA.
Right,
and I don't know if your listeners really understand that. You haven't really, if memory serves me correct, you haven't really gone over that. But I do feel like they need to hear that. They need to know that my DNA was tested. My blood type was tested. My blood type was not at the scene. My fingerprints were taken from the Scott County Sheriff's Department. My fingerprints were not at the scene. My palm prints were taken. My palm prints were not at the scene. My DNA was sent to the FBI, and the FBI concluded that my DNA was not at the scene. There was no paper trail. There was no connection to the victim until the Chantel Kreider testimony that has since been debunked. There was no evidence at all against me, no physical evidence, no connection. And it needs to be clarified to people. I was not in the area. I was not in Southeast Missouri the night Angela Mischelle Lawless was murdered. I was 350 miles away from the scene the night Angela Mischelle Lawless was murdered. This also needs to be said. I did not have an extensive criminal record at the time of Angela Mischelle Lawless's murder. I do not have an extensive criminal record now. I don't have an adult record. My record is clean. My record only consists of a couple of juvenile infractions. But allow me to clarify this too. Even if I had been convicted of 100 felonies, at the time of Angela Mischelle Lawless's murder. I did not kill Angela Mischelle Lawless. So we can stop gaslighting the case with misinformation that is not relevant to the case.
For those listening, this is kind of addressing the Facebook comment that kind of poked out on a different Facebook group in the Cape Girardeau area that's been addressed. But yeah, Josh.
It also points that it's not the first time that people have tried to gaslight me and gaslight the case with misinformation that claims those things and uses those things as arguments.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Just yeah. So we're clear. Like I wouldn't be out here doing, 15 hours of content.
No, there's nothing.
Like
there's nothing. I do know who was at the scene the night Angela Mischelle Lawless was murdered, because he put himself at the scene.
Right.
Mark Abbott.
Yep.
That's what I do know.
Yep.
And what I do know is that Mark Abbott has been in prison for several felonies. And this information only accomplishes obstructing justice for Angela Mischelle Lawless. So for people who claim that they genuinely care for her, that they genuinely want justice for Angela Mischelle Lawless, then disseminate real information, not disinformation, not misinformation, but real information.
All right, Josh, we're gonna conclude our episode here. Again, it's been a great experience here talking to you about the case. We'll probably do some more of this as we go along. Really appreciate your perspective on the Amanda Ash announcement and all of the complications of the law enforcement in this case. So appreciate you chiming in here and joining me on this. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate you too. And I appreciate everybody that's following the Lawless Files podcast and everybody that's in the Lawless Files discussion group. I appreciate all of them. I would only ask that, we use our involvement to get other people involved, maybe everybody that's following the podcast can try to go out and maybe have a goal. I'm saying, we've heard of these challenges like the ice bucket challenge and things of that nature. I would challenge every follower of the Lawless Files podcast and every participant in the Lawless Files discussion group on Facebook to go out and get 10 or 15 other people involved in the discussion group, involved in subscribing to the Lawless Files podcast, and let's build our network. We need to continue to build the network of listeners and people involved in this that care about this, to continue to if not pressured, but to continue to possibly encourage Amanda Ash and the Missouri Attorney General's office and the Missouri Highway Patrol to do the right thing in this, and eventually, hopefully, to be able to encourage the feds to do the right thing as well. So I would just challenge people to get other people involved. Let's target 10 to 15 other people and see if we can build our network.
Thank you, Josh. That's I appreciate that. And yeah, there's power in numbers. They can't ignore this stuff forever. The more people we have on board, the louder the megaphone is. So appreciate everybody who's listening and following and subscribing, all of those things. It really helps. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on the Lawless Files. I'm your host, Bob Miller.